All right, let's talk about wide receiver Trey Harris, who the Los Angeles Chargers drafted, and I find him to be a very fascinating player who does kind of feel like a very Jim Harbaugh guy. So let's start things off with the play you see on your screen. Just going to be a quick wide receiver screen. Like, watch how he's the one closest towards the sideline right here. Watch how little he moves at first. Look, it feels like 10 guys on offense move and one doesn't. He waits for the ball, which, hey, that's your job. Wait for the ball. So, there you go. At this point, though, a defender has read this play well, is coming in to try and make a play on Harris. However, watch how he just isn't able to make that guy, isn't able to make the tackle. Harris is really difficult to bring down, and you can't help but view him as, I guess, two different potential players, right? There is the Deebo Samuel, the guy who just feels like he's impossible to bring down in open space. There's also the N'Keal Harry aspect, a guy who was really good at this stuff in college, and then once he gets to the NFL, isn't quite able to make it work. Which one will he be? Well, I don't know, but, let's be positive and say there is Deebo Samuel potential here, right? Because, like, heading over here, I do think he does a really good job in open space. And one way that's going to help him is just, this isn't going to be very well defended. You see the route that he's running, trying to get into a gap in coverage more over the middle. Watch how when this play begins, you see it's a well-ran route. It is. He doesn't fully sell where he's going until he gets here, but ultimately, a defensive coordinator is going to watch this tape and say that they did not defend this very well. But that's okay. Watch what Harris is going to do after the catch, though, because a lot of players would probably be getting tackled right around after they make the grab. But watch him and he does the fight right here, right? There's contact, but man, it takes a lot to bring him down right around the goal line. I mean, that is, really good stuff there, I think, from Trey Harris. And so there are some real benefits to his game. Now, I have to be honest, when I watch him play, I do think there are some critiques with his game. There are. Like, heading over here, he doesn't win all the time, which, like, it'd be weird if he did win all the time. Very few players are always winning, but, like, there are, I think especially like these types of routes, this is a slant route against zone coverage, but it's essentially just a one-on-one matchup right here. As you see, his job is really to try and just get into a gap in coverage, but ultimately it kind of gets taken away completely by the cornerback right there. So, there are times when he isn't always winning. I think that's reasonable to say. Even this next one, it's going to be kind of a similar thing. This time it's man coverage, so, at least in zone coverage, you're kind of trying to get into a gap in coverage. It's more understandable. If the defensive back reads it quickly, there's only so much you can do. But here, there are things he can do. However, when this play begins, he fights for the inside leverage, but gets slowed enough down by the corner that there really isn't a ton of space. And this is the downside of Harris. Listen, he's a big guy who's hard to bring down. He, for his size, is fast, but he is not a blazing speed guy, right? He ran a 4.54, which is not bad. Again, for his size, that's good. But it's not like he's, a 4.3 guy or anything like that, right? However, let's go over here now, because I still think there are some really good positives in his game. And for one thing, despite the fact that he might not be blazing speed and running by guys, I actually think that, seeing him in deep routes, maybe that's more impressive. So like this play, it is going to be a deep route. And when this play begins, to me, it's going to be his route running. And this is ultimately why I'm still very fascinated in him as a prospect, where he's going to kind of fake as though he could be going more kind of outside of numbers, but then is going to get the inside leverage right here. So you have two defensive backs who are back right here, but neither one are in perfect position. So that way, when Harris does turn on to afterburners, he's able to get that step from his route running and keep the step, right? Sometimes you don't have to blow by guys and get open that way. Sometimes you just need the speed to be able to keep the step that you have earned through route running, and he can certainly do that. There's always and wide receivers are a really hard position to evaluate in general, because there is always the question of like, okay, well, how well is that going to work against NFL corners? And really, it is an educated guessing game at that point. But like, there are some real benefits that I do see on his tape. And also a play like this, where it's going to be a zone coverage concept. And to me, this is probably my favorite stuff about Harris, and I think this is really his biggest highlights, even if they're the smallest plays. There are bigger highlights, but to me, this is the stuff I see and say, oh yeah, this will work at the next level. So you see defensive backs playing pretty far off here. Due to this scheme, it's a cover 3 zone. When this play begins, you're going to see how smoothly Harris cuts there, right? Fakes those going deep, but kind of on a dime is able to stop, and now is open. And on top of this, he's able to make the catch and then kind of cuts back inside, which was pretty clever to gain even more yards. His footwork is, to me, what is going to make or break him at the next level, and I think it will make him at the next level, make things work for him at the next level, because it is really just that good. And while, to be honest, there's a lot of good things to like about him, right? He's big, he's physical, he has good footwork, and he has enough speed, I think, to still work. At least that's what I see on tape. Ultimately, when it comes to wide receivers, there's always just wildly different opinions about them. It is one of the most difficult positions to project. It is the position that tends to have the most day 2 players end up being good players, like the most players drafted in rounds 2 and 3 that end up being Pro Bowlers and having success at the next level, which is why ultimately just alone in a vacuum, it's a good idea to be drafting receivers at this spot, right? If you're drafting receivers, in rounds 2 and 3, you're doing something right. In fact, I used to have an expression that I guess I still do, which is never let a day 2 of the draft go by without drafting at least one safety or wide receiver, because those two positions tend to have the highest hit rate in those rounds. So, from all of that stuff, I do think that Trey Harris, just from a vacuum, getting a receiver makes sense. Now, again, wide receivers have very different, people have very different opinions on them. So some people are going to sit here and say, this is absolutely a great move, he's fantastic. Some people are going to say, he's overrated, he's not that good. And that's okay. For me, I do see some cons and I do see some pros. At the end of the day, he's a big guy who still moves really well, cuts so well that you just feel like he's going to work, right? You just feel like there is some good stuff there. And while I could make some Treylon Burks comparisons in the bigger guy who moves well for his size, but then once you get to the NFL, you go up against guys who are big and move well for their size, and what else can you do? I think right now, Treylon Burks has kind of had injuries derail his career a little bit, but also B, for Trey Harris, he is someone who I think has the footwork to still allow him to have other ways to win, and then you can take advantage of the benefits that he has. So I think that's ultimately the biggest difference between the two, and why I am higher on Harris when I was lower on a guy like Treylon Burks. But ultimately, I think it's an interesting pick, and again, someone who, even if he doesn't reach his ceiling, should be at least a pretty good player in a receiving room that needs pretty good players. So those are kind of my thoughts on the Chargers. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.